I'm Brian Barnett. I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a doctor. I have no legal license in any field of psychology. But I did live a large part of my life with borderline personality disorder unknowingly. And I really did rid myself of the disorder completely and permanently. Through that, I've become an expert on issues involving emotional health. I accept no responsibility whatsoever for your feelings, thoughts, behaviors, decisions, and actions, including your decision to watch or listen to this show at all. But I do hope you might benefit yourself from the insights I share. Happy Thursday, everybody. Actually, it's Friday for me. It might be any day, depending on the day that you're choosing to listen to this. Nice to have you back with me again this week. I'm pretty tired. I'm worn down, and I'm looking forward to a weekend of doing not a whole lot. A couple things before we get started. I got my doors open, and the wind is blowing through. I'm not willing to close my doors to cut out any sound that might create, because it's just so pleasant. It's November, and just a beautiful, beautiful day today. Mid-70s. Oh, there we go. A lot of wind right there. That's rare. That type of burst is rare. But it's so beautiful. The leaves have not quite completely fallen off the trees. They have mostly. But there's just a few stragglers. And just a beautiful, kind of creates a beautiful ambiance. So because I'm worn out, let me tell you why I'm worn out. I'm re-recording all the video for the Last Symptom Fundamentals course, that intense 2-week course that you can sign up for over at thelastsymptom.com. When I originally recorded that, I did it through Zoom, and the video and audio quality was not always up to my preferred standards. So I've been updating that whole thing, and that's required a lot of work every night for me. And I've had a lot of work on top of that. So, how do I explain it to some? If you folks don't have your own podcast or anything like that, let me explain to you that when I'm on camera or when I'm recording my voice or anything like that, it's work. It's a lot of work. And then afterwards, there's a lot of editing that goes into it. But just the being put on the spot of being on camera and, having to choose your words very purposefully with everything I say, it's not the same as if I'm just sitting in my underwear, in my room talking to somebody on the phone. It's a lot different. It's a lot more formal. And I know that might sound like a funny word to use for what we do here, because I'm kind of a laid back kind of guy anyway, and not formal by nature. But just think about any time you're put on the spot to get up in front of people and talk. It's not the same as if you're just sitting around chatting with buddies, is it? And so every time I'm on camera, every time I'm recording my voice into a microphone for thousands of other people to hear, it's work. I'm not anxious. I ain't nervous, but I am trying to maintain a certain amount of decorum and create a presentation, right? And that's work. So it just wears me out. So when I update a chapter on the Last Symptom Fundamentals course, that's me sitting there for an hour and a half talking into the camera and talking to lots of people. That's exhausting. And then I get done and I go to edit everything. That takes up most of my next day. And then that evening, I'm sitting down to record again in front of a lot of people in front of the camera, and it's exhausting. So I slept in this morning to try to to get my energy back, and I slightly considered not putting out a show this week, but I said, you know what, I've got a lot of folks who will appreciate me putting out anything, whether it's profoundly insightful or not, and they'd probably just like to hear what I've been up to, do a check-in like that, know what's going on in my life. I've got my buddy coming over tonight. That's another thing. I decided to do this updating of the Last Symptom Fundamentals course right during the World Series. And so I've been trying to catch as much of the World Series as I can of baseball. And the Phillies, of course, and Astros are playing in the World Series. And the Phillies are one of my two favorite teams. So that has really thrown a wrench into things too. If I could do it over again, I probably wouldn't have started updating the Last Symptom Fundamentals course until after the World Series was passed. But got my friend Jeffrey coming over tonight. We're going to play cards, drink some Mr. Hooch, and talk about some backpacking plans that are coming up here very soon. I'm really looking forward to that. Some of you might remember that I missed a big backpacking trip I had planned back in May, and so this is going to hopefully compensate for that. I prefer backpacking this time of year anyway, when it's cold, especially cold at nights, and kind of mild during midday. That's just perfect for me. And also this time of year you don't run into a whole lot of other people, so I'm looking forward to that. Got a few things to talk about before we get started. Let's do the announcements. The announcements are thelastsymptom.com. That's my website full of free and paid resources. The free resources I'm happy to provide. I really am. The paid resources, of course, offer support. They support financially what I do. So run over there to thelastsymptom.com, take advantage of the free resources, and of course check out the paid resources, see if there's anything there that you might benefit from that might support my work. Of course, if you're in our online community over there at Locals, just being a supporter on Locals does support my work, so there's no need for you to feel like you need to give me a contribution, a financial contribution every month, as long as you're a supporter on our Locals group, because that does financially support my work. And it comes with benefits. So the way you join our online community over there, we're over 8,000 strong now, is you go to thelastsymptom.locals.com, or you download the locals.com app from the App Store, and you search for The Last Symptom by Brian Barnett. All right, a few things here. Do you ever make yourself eggs? Do you like eggs? How do you prepare your eggs? Do you like them scrambled? Do you like them over easy? Do you like them sunny side up? Well, I like my eggs either sunny side up or over easy. Usually sunny side up, because I like the yolk, and I like to toast some bread, and then I like to dip my bread in the yolk. When you're making your eggs, do you ever break the yolk? You ever have your heart set on a nice couple of eggs sunny side up or over easy, and do you ever break the yolk? Man, that's frustrating, isn't it? In fact, the other day I was making myself breakfast and sat down to cook some eggs, and 3 eggs in a row I broke the yolk before I even got them into the pan. Man, that's frustrating. Well, I've learned a way that you can make sure that you can crack the egg without ever risking breaking the yolk. Would you like to know my secret? Yes, it'll work every time. The only thing you have to do is start off intending to make scrambled eggs. And it works. I'll tell you, it does work. And the reason why I think it works is because you loosen up. You say, you know, I'm making scrambled eggs, so it doesn't matter if I break the yolk. And so the way you go about cracking the egg then is with no anxiety or no tenseness, and it works every time. So if you want nice pair of eggs sunny side up, just go into the process intending to make scrambled eggs. Have you heard about this pilot here? Where was this? North Carolina. Raleigh, North Carolina. Charles Hew Crooks is his name. They spent the day piloting parachuters. And then what happened was they were coming back for a landing, and this Charles Hew Crooks was just a young guy, 25 years old, I think, something like that. He was the co-pilot. As they're coming down for a landing, he does it wrong, and he messes up their landing gear. So they go, wow, our landing gear's messed up. We're going to have to fly to a different airport and make an emergency landing. And about 20 minutes into the flight, old Charles Hew Crooks becomes very upset. And he says, first of all, he opens up a window, and they think he got sick. He opened up the window because he was getting sick. But then he apologizes to the pilot, says he needs to step out, and he walks to the back of the plane where they got the back hatch open on the plane, and he just jumps out and dies. Let me read this to you. This is from meaww.com. There's all kinds of articles about this, but when this happened over the summer, and then I said, boy, I need to follow this. I need to follow this as more details come out, because obviously it deals with emotional issues, doesn't it? This was not a decision made on his part with critical thought or rationale. And it's interesting that the pilot, after Charles jumps out of the plane, the pilot lands the plane fine. He got a couple bumps on him and a couple scratches, but walked away fine. According to a report by NTSB, Charles Crooks lowered the ramp in the back of the airplane, indicating that he felt like he was going to be sick and needed air. Raleigh, North Carolina, a preliminary report by the National Transportation Safety Board, that's the NTSB, has disclosed that a North Carolina co-pilot who plunged to his death from a plane was distressed over losing the aircraft's right main landing gear. Charles Hew Crooks died on July 29th after falling from the Casa 212 he was flying along with a pilot. His body was later found behind a house near Sunset Lake and Hilltop Needlemore roads. The report said that Charles and the pilot in command had done 2 skydiving runs and were about to do a third one as they jetted back to an airport when the craft's right main landing gear got defunct during a hard landing. He wasn't even 25, he was 23. At the time, the 23-year-old was in charge, as told by the main pilot to the NTSB. The main pilot, whose name has not been revealed, also claimed that he then took charge of the small plane and commanded Charles to announce an emergency, as well as ask for a diversion to Raleigh-Durham International Airport for landing. However, minutes after that, the young man became visibly upset, the report citing the pilot mentioned. It also noted that Charles unfastened the side cockpit window and may have gotten sick, before adding that eventually the unnamed pilot had to manage radio communication as well, as Charles got up from his seat, removed his headset, apologized, and departed the airplane via the aft ramp door. 911 calls and radio traffic showed that the pilot had informed about Charles fallen from the aircraft without a parachute. After the plane landed at the airport, the pilot was moved to Duke Hospital. This is the main pilot. There was substantial damage to the landing gear. Only days before his death, Charlie shared with his parents that he was exactly where he wanted to be, doing exactly what he wanted to do. Not many get the chance to live that way. Somebody's chainsawing some firewood, sounds like. Well, what do you reckon happened? To really get an insightful understanding of what probably happened, you got to put yourself in Charles' shoes. 23-year-old flying this plane. They go for a landing and they crumple the landing gear. It's interesting to me that he didn't just, as soon as the landing gear crumpled, he didn't jump up and say, "Hey, I'm out of here. Sorry about everything," and jump out the back. He sat there for 20 minutes as they're flying. Now, what's going on through Charles' mind? Charles is thinking about the, in his mind, inevitable crash, right, when they get to the next airport. And as time is passing and as they're flying and his mind and his feelings are going over this tragic possibility, he's getting more and more frightened and more hopeless, until he can't take it anymore. He says, I can't take the dread of what might happen, and I need to make a decision now. And that's when he excuses himself and jumps out the back of the plane. This is really a discussion, ain't it, about how feelings don't determine reality. Think about how much we torture ourselves so many times. I was telling somebody the other day that when I was in my 20s, I was playing around with, I think I was eating popcorn. And I was trying to get popcorn out of my mouth. You know how when you eat popcorn, then you've got like all this things get stuck in your teeth. And I was cleaning my mouth out of, the popcorn out of my mouth with my tongue. And I felt a lump on the bottom of my mouth. I thought, what is that? And once I focused on that lump, I could not stop thinking about it. Of course, I had borderline personality disorder back then. Had I was living with an emotional disorder and had not yet sorted out a lot of my emotional issues. But my tongue settled on that, and I just couldn't stop touching it with my tongue. And couldn't stop thinking about it, and a couple weeks went by. I kept putting my tongue down there and feeling that lump. And I had convinced myself that I had this tumor in my mouth. Big cancerous tumor in my mouth. It was a rock hard lump. And finally I said something to somebody. I remember, I think I said it to my mother. I said, I got a big lump in my mouth. It's pretty big. And I think I need to go to the doctor for it. She said, well, yeah, do that. So I made a doctor's appointment. And then for the week or so that I had to wait for the doctor's appointment, again, I couldn't sleep at night. I was just terrified. I kept putting my tongue down there. I was certain by the time I got to that doctor's appointment that I was going to have this really intense surgery. I was going to be deformed, or I was going to die. I had all these things going through my mind, but I had convinced myself. Got to the doctor. He takes a look at it and he goes, yeah, everybody's got that. Everybody's got that in their mouth. It's a natural part of human anatomy. So if you feel down at the bottom, like the bottom palate of your mouth, you've got two bumps underneath where your tongue lies. And that's what I was feeling. Oh, the relief. Now we go back to Charles Hew Crooks. Are you beginning to understand what probably happened? What was probably going on inside of him? His feelings and his fear worked up a reality for him that was not reality, but it becomes so real to him within those 20 minutes that he said, I can't take it. I can't take the fear of this anymore, of what might happen when we try to land at this other airport. And so what did he do? He just jumped out. He brought an end to himself. He could have landed that plane and walked away with maybe a bruise on his elbow. Instead, he jumped out without a parachute and died. I don't have a great, huge outline developed around this or anything, but you can take this real life story and analyze it and learn things about yourself. Use it to improve your life moving forward. How often do your feelings say, oh, I'm certain about a thing, I'm certain about it, got to make these decisions, and then later you really regret those decisions, don't you? I tell people, never make big decisions when your emotions are volatile. I don't care how long it takes. Don't do it. Don't do it. Studies have been shown that when people are upset in their brains, the studies have shown that it blocks off reason and critical thought. So when your emotions are very volatile, it actually drowns out your ability to think critically and clearly. So what's the only answer then for when your emotions are volatile and you feel like you have to make decisions right now? Don't do it. Don't do it. It's a major adjustment I've made in my life since I've become healthy. First of all, you have to be aware that your emotions are volatile. You have to be aware that you are under intense stress, or you're intensely angry, or you're intensely sad, or any of these things. These are all intense, high-powered, volatile emotions, right? Not the time to be making important decisions. So what do? You wait. That's what you do. You wait. You wait a day. Well, let's say you wait an hour. And after an hour, your emotions still have not completely calmed down. So you wait another hour. You wait a day if you have to. What happens if the next day, when you think about this thing that you're upset about, your emotions are still volatile? Wait another day. I don't care if it takes a whole month. You don't make big decisions while your emotions are volatile. Not long ago, I told you all about a letter I got from my dad. Remember that? If you've listened to every episode up to now, you'll remember that. Got that letter. I was angry about it. I was angry and bothered by it. And do you remember what I told you I was going to do and what I did? I told you I was not going to make any decisions about how to handle that situation until my emotions had calmed down. And it took, if I remember right, it took a little bit over a week for my emotions to calm down. And once I knew that my emotions were no longer involved, I knew that was then the time to think about how to handle that situation and what decision to make regarding that. And, at that time, the thing that my emotions wanted me to do was to write a reply letter immediately, or to go out there to where he lives, or to call him, that's what my emotions wanted me to do. And it felt right. It felt right. It felt like, yes, this is the right way to handle that. But I know from experience and from my recovery, don't trust anything that you believe is the right course of action while your emotions are volatile. Because once your emotions are calm and out of the picture, inevitably you will look back and go, whew, everything I wanted to do and seemed like the greatest idea in the world at the time would have been the stupidest, dumbest way to handle that situation. So ultimately what I did with my father there was nothing. You see, my emotions wanted me to act, to write a letter, to respond, to reply, to do all these things. And then once my emotions were no longer in the picture and I could think perfectly clearly without their influence, I saw that what my feelings wanted me to do would have been the absolute worst course of action. The only right course of action was to do nothing. absolutely nothing, to not respond in any way, to not acknowledge the letter in any way. What if Charles Hew Crooks had not acted on his feelings? That's what he did when he jumped out the back of that airplane, right? He acted on his feelings. He allowed his feelings to determine the truth for him. So he based his decision making based on his feelings, and it brought him to his death. What if Charles Hew Crooks would have said to himself, my feelings are really, really volatile right now. They're really telling me all sorts of things. I'm fearing the worst here. Fearing the worst possible everything. I don't want to end up in a plane crash all mangled and everything. I can't have that happen to me. What if he would have said, he would have caught himself, said, my emotions are very volatile. I can't make a decision while my emotions are volatile, no matter what. Because of that, it's best for me to just try to land this plane. And who knows what might happen. But what I know for sure is I can't trust my emotions in this situation. What if he had done that? They would have landed the plane. He would have gone to the hospital, gotten a Band-Aid on a scratch, and then he possibly could have learned from that. He possibly could have learned the same thing I'm teaching you guys right now. Never trust your feelings. And then think about after that experience, him thinking back to, man, I was going to jump out of that airplane. Oh my gosh, I was going to jump out of that airplane. How dumb would that have been? How foolish. Do you think he would have felt some relief and learned something from that? Well, I hope so. And it's tragedy. It's just a tragedy the way that played out. So, guys, girls, don't ever make big decisions when your emotions are volatile. Don't ever trust your feelings to determine realities for you or to base important decisions on. It can kill you. Really can, or it can get somebody else hurt, or it can result in irreversible decisions. Think about how many partners in the heat of a vicious argument decide that they're going to go through with a divorce. That's not the time to decide on a divorce when you're screaming at each other, kicking doors in and punching the wall and stuff like that. That is not the time to decide on a life-changing thing such as a divorce. The time to decide on something like that is when you're perfectly calm and your feelings are not informing you. They're not influencing you. Where you can sit with a clear mind and look at the situation and say, this is the right course of action. I know it. I'm calm. I'm thinking clearly. I won't have any regrets about this later. It is the right thing to do. How about cutting your parents out of your life? When is the time to make that decision? When they've really ticked you off? When you're really upset with them? When you're pacing around the house with your fists clenched? That's not the time to make a decision like that. Time to make a decision like that, and it might be the right decision to cut them out of your life. It might be the right decision to get a divorce. But the right time to make that decision is when you're perfectly calm. You clearly, logically, with critical thinking, understand the reasons why it must be that way. That's the time to make a decision like that. Not when you're angry. Not when you're completely depressed or deeply depressed. Not when your feelings are volatile like that, or in an extreme place. Well, in the last episode of the show, I brought up, it was a live stream, and I brought up about how one of the members of our community had talked about how her father had made her feel ashamed of how she felt at that moment, and feeling even more humiliation showing it, and how I could completely identify with that. She really put perfectly into words my experience with my own dad, how he would beat me down and make me feel humiliated for feeling things, and then even more humiliated because I couldn't contain those feelings from being visible to others. Because she's able to explain this, so articulate this so well, it's clear to me she understands the nature of it, and it's a good thing. It means she's on the right path to identifying how that affected her, the messages within that, and undoing it. We can reject messages like that. Can't turn off the feelings, but once we know the messages that the feelings are telling us, we can mentally reject the messages, can't we? She went on to say, about 2 years ago, I found out about her disorder. She says, I remember thinking there's no way out. And then she discovered my work. She said while she was doing that search, she saw everybody talking about it kind of in the same ways, same superficial ways. All this talk about how it's impossible to cure that lie. She said, however, when I read your articles, I was blown. My mind was blown. This guy knows what he's talking about. Without understanding, she didn't understand. Here's the interesting thing. She didn't understand, of course, all the insights at the time, but she identified that I did know what I was talking about. And so she started following, started learning. She said then, my only regret is not committing 100% to your work then. It was only this September I got serious. And these 6 months have completely changed me drastically and provided me a new understanding on life. I wanted to comment for a second about the fact that she says, boy, looking back, if only I had really started the work earlier. And that's a common theme among people I talk to. Oh, if only I had known this sooner. If only I had started this sooner. So I wanted to comment a little bit on that, because it's human nature to think that way, and even I sometimes think, what if I had known the things that I learned that, really led to my authentic recovery? What if I had known that 10 years earlier? Well, like I say, that's a natural way to think. It's a natural human tendency to think that way. But the timing is always right. The timing for these things is always right. It's never wrong. If you think about my example, for example, if I had discovered these things 10 years earlier in my life, would it have mattered? Would it have made any difference? No, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered. In fact, if I had discovered it 10 years earlier, maybe I wouldn't be here now. Why is that? It's because of readiness. It's because of readiness. When a person is ready for the information. Inherently, what it means when a person is ready is that they are receptive and they act, they identify what they're hearing as being of high value, and then they act on it and they change. I'm not convinced that I didn't come across at some time in my life earlier than when my recovery started. I didn't come across the same concepts. But if I was not ready for the concepts, what happened? They just went right over my head. I wasn't willing to hear it. I wasn't willing to see it. I wasn't willing to think about it. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready then. Becoming fully ready is sometimes a process that we have to work up to. I always use diets as a good analogy. If I commit to a diet before I'm really ready, I won't end up following through with the diet very well, will I? I know this because I really need to go on a diet right now. I've just been not very strict with myself about what I've been eating lately. And so I tell myself, I need to lose 20 pounds, 30 pounds. I'm going to start this Monday. I am going to start this Monday. But in the lead up to Monday, I don't really change my habits. I don't really try to change my mindset. I kind of keep going business as usual right up until Sunday night. I stay up too late Sunday night until 3 o'clock in the morning, eating cheesy poofs and drinking Mountain Dew. And then the next day, I'm not primed for that diet, am I? I might start with a healthy breakfast, might even make it through a healthy lunch, but by supper time, I'm already off the diet. Because even though on some level I do want to diet, I see the need to diet, I wasn't ready, was I? I didn't ready myself. So when I say this, when I use this wording, if I commit to a diet before I'm really ready, that's really a nonsensical statement, isn't it? Because if I'm not really ready, I'm not committed. So I'm using commit incorrectly, aren't I? When a person is committed, that means they are committed. They're going to follow through. So there's really no such thing as committing to something before you're ready. It's a fake commitment, and it's not a real commitment. It's more like wishful thinking is what it is. But if I say to myself, I want to start a diet and I'm not ready, then I won't end up following through very well. So for success, what I typically do for a diet is I'll typically go through a process of building up my resolve, making a specific plan, picking a specific start date. Not just picking a specific start date, but in the days leading up to that date, I will begin priming myself for the diet. So I'll start cutting back on the junk food. I'll start cutting down on my calories. I'll start drinking more water, things like that, so that when that date comes, I'm ready. I'm already primed and ready for real. So often committing to recovery is a lot like that process. The point is that before a person is ready, nothing's going to happen. So it's not constructive. Wind's blowing dirt into my eye here. Boy, it is beautiful out there, I'll tell you. I hope the wind is not disturbing this episode too much, but gosh, it sure feels nice to sit here and feel that breeze on me. So good. Got my coffee here, got good company, got my stomach making some noises. It's all this talk about dieting and lunch and everything. Really the point is, it's not constructive to look back in time and go, boy, let's say you're 50 years old. Boy, if I had learned this in my 30s. Let me tell you, you weren't ready in your 30s. You weren't ready in your 30s. You would not have accepted it. You would not have absorbed it. You would not have latched onto it. Things happened for you. And I this is not a discussion about fate. I don't believe in fate at all. It's not a discussion about fate. I'm simply saying that as far as readiness, you weren't ready. Things had to occur as they have for you to right now be ready. Right? You had to suffer enough. You had to have enough experiences. You had to get to a point where you were tired of, really, you had to get to a point where the quote unquote imaginary rewards of being unhealthy were less attractive to you than change. Right? So things had to happen the way they have happened for you to be here now. Same thing with me. I can look back into the past with some regret and go, boy, just think of all the pain and heartache that I could have avoided, creating for myself and for others, if I had just known this stuff 10 years earlier, it wouldn't have worked 10 years earlier. Everything had to happen the way it happened for me to be here now. I had to suffer those things. I had to hurt people that way. And then I had to live to regret it. I had to learn, I had to get to a place where I was ready. And what was involved in me becoming ready? All of that stuff was involved in me becoming ready. Now here's another thing about readiness. Sometimes let's go back to talking about the boxer that I bring up every once in a while. He gets punched so hard, he falls down to the mat. He doesn't just hop right up, even though he's seeing double and everything. What does he do? He stays on the mat to regain some strength, to kind of regain his bearings, regain his strength. He's listening to the count. 1, 2, 3, and he might go all the way up to 9 before he gets to his feet, right? Immediately after my huge borderline personality disorder crisis, I needed that time. So for, probably a couple years, I was like that boxer, just regaining some strength. So I might have been ready then. I was ready then. I just didn't have the strength. I needed time to regain my strength, some strength, and to regain my spirit. But for that couple of years, the breath was completely knocked out of me. So I needed time to just not care. Keep that in mind when we're talking about readiness. When you're ready, when you're not ready. Crushing pain or circumstances involving high stress, things like this. Sometimes a boxer who just gets punched in the nose and knocked down needs to do nothing. Catch his breath or her breath before he or she can really get started. And there's nothing wrong with that. The important thing is intention, endurance, a stick-to-itiveness, a not giving up, the whole Rocky attitude. You get knocked down, but you're not out, right? You're just biding your time for a minute or two to catch your breath so that you can get back up and get into the fight. That also is important in any discussion about readiness. So I hope you understand what I'm saying. You might, have you ever heard the expression, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak? You might have concrete intentions for your recovery, but you just might be worn out, emotionally and physically worn out. So you might need some time to just languish for a while until you can build up some energy. And that process should not go on indefinitely, but it can definitely take a year or two sometimes, as it did in my case. Then the person I'm talking to here says, I always wonder if it's fair to have kids. Boy, we're going from one topic to another here, aren't we? Talked about several different things. Now we're going to talk about having kids. I always wonder if it's fair to have kids without truly knowing the emotional issues are resolved. I know you said you'll know when you no longer see yourself as unworthy, unlovable, blah, blah, blah. It's all so exhausting but necessary. So you understand what she's saying? She's saying, when is the right time to have kids? Is the right time to decide to have kids? This is for people who do not have kids and who are working on their emotional health. Do you necessarily have to wait until all of your emotional issues are completely and fully resolved? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I didn't, and I'm the best father I know. And I say that with no narcissism, no sense of arrogance. I just simply am the best father that I know. And I decided to become a father when I was still dealing with some of these issues. The reason why I decided on it, though, is because I had made so many gains, and there was no doubt in my mind that I was on the right path. I was moving forward. There was no going back. So there were some things still yet for me to work out of my system and to identify and address. But I had come so far. I knew there was no turning back. I knew I was on the right path. There was no doubt in my mind about it. And I had complete, reliable faith. I say faith, but too many people think that faith refers to just a blind belief in a thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about I could see for a certainty that I was going to get where I wanted to be. So faith is not a blind certainty. Faith is not a blind certainty or a blind belief in a thing. Faith is based on evidence. You are certain, you are convinced of a thing. That's faith. Faith is not like, well, I believe in the tooth fairy and in unicorns, therefore they're real. They're real to me. That's my truth. That's not faith. That is somebody using their feelings to determine reality for them. It's denial is what it is. What I'm talking about is with hard, reliable evidence, you're convinced that a thing is true. You are convinced of a thing. And so I had come so far, I could see the results of everything that I was doing. I knew I was moving in the right direction. And I said to myself, I'm at the tail end of this thing. I'm about to turn 40. Now's a good time. Now's a really good time. By the time my daughter comes here, I may be completely free of this stuff altogether. But, you know, the reality is that there's no such thing as the perfect parent who knows all the answers and never makes any mistakes. Even today, I'm not that guy. Even me saying that I'm the best father I know, that is not the same as me saying that I know everything and I never make mistakes. A good parent understands the fundamental principles and laws of emotional health, has a proper attitude and perspective towards feelings, self, and life, and is working hard to live in harmony with those things. A good parent understands that in every interaction with their children, they're communicating messages. Yes, even when I look at my daughter, just the way I look at her, I'm communicating messages. When she comes to talk to me and show me something, the way I react to that, do I put what I'm doing down and give her my attention? That is a message that she's receiving from me. Do I not put what I'm doing down? Do I continue doing what I'm doing and just kind of half-heartedly, That also is a message that she's getting from me. My neighbor over there is having an emphysema attack or something. So good parents understand that. In every interaction with their kids, they're communicating messages. Messages that their children will adopt and use to understand life, understand reality. So though a good parent may not always get everything exactly right, he or she understands the healthy principles and laws involved. And this means that mistakes aren't really that big of a deal. Why do I say that mistakes aren't really that big of a deal when you're a healthy parent? Because when mistakes are made, the healthy parent realizes the unhealthy messages they've communicated to their children and then can sit their children down and explain why that wasn't right and effectively negate any harm that could be caused there. When I make a mistake with my daughter, the conversation I have with her afterwards is not like this. Honey, I made a big mistake. I'm sorry about that. That's not the type of conversation I have with her. When I make a mistake with my daughter, the nature of the conversation goes like this. Honey, I made a mistake. Let me tell you why it was a mistake. It was a mistake because I should have considered your feelings before I said that. I should have dignified you and have given you an opportunity to answer some questions that I might have before I decided that I knew the situation as fully. So clearly I did not understand the situation fully. I jumped to conclusions, and that was not right of me. What I should have done is thought to myself, is this fair? Has Eloise had an opportunity to explain herself? And that's what I did wrong, honey. That's what I'm going to do different moving forward. You see, what does the message... So even though I made a mistake, what is the message in the way that I've addressed the mistake? The message is, your feelings do matter. The mistake was that I did not dignify you as a person. I had a temporary lapse in judgment, and I failed to dignify you, and I failed to properly take your feelings into consideration. So the harm that might have been done is negated, because in my mistake I failed to communicate the right message to regarding her feelings and herself. But by fixing the mistake or addressing the mistake, I corrected that, didn't I? So mistakes aren't really that big of a deal when you're a healthy parent, because you understand the nature of the mistake. You can negate that. You can address that. You can communicate the right thing to your children. Let them know and see that you perfectly see where the mistake was. The incorrect or the unhealthy messaging that you might have communicated unintentionally to them. Let's see. Anything else I can share with you here to close the show? Yes, a poem. Here's a poem attributed. I found it on the internet, and then I tried looking for it somewhere. I tried to look for it in from different sources, and I couldn't really verify without any doubt whatsoever that Charles Bukowski really wrote this, but maybe you can. So I found this. This is attributed to Charles Bukowski. It's called They Are Everywhere. And it's been a while since I read you a poem, so here we go on this breezy, unusually warm autumn day. They are everywhere. The tragedy sniffers are all about. They get up in the morning and begin to find things wrong. And they fling themselves into a rage about it. A rage that lasts until bedtime, where even there they twist in their insomnia, not able to rid their mind of the petty obstacles they have encountered. They feel set against. It's a plot. And by being constantly angry, they feel that they are constantly right. You see them in traffic, honking wildly at the slightest infraction, cursing, spewing their invectives. You feel them in lines, at banks, at supermarkets, at movies. They are pressing at your back, walking on your heels. They are impatient to a fury. They are everywhere, and into everything, these violently unhappy souls. Actually, they are frightened, never wanting to be wrong. They lash out incessantly. It is a malady, an illness of that breed. The first one I saw like that was my father. And since then, I have seen 1,000 fathers, 10,000 fathers, wasting their lives in hatred, tossing their lives into the cesspool, and ranting on. Charles Bukowski, They Are Everywhere. Is that a poem about evil people? Not necessarily. It's a poem about unhealthy people, people who dislike themselves, people who are deeply dissatisfied with themselves and don't know it. I know, because I was once the subject of this poem. And I'm not anymore, and you don't have to be, and neither does anybody else. Some people are by choice, but not the majority of people. The majority of people are simply unhealthy, and by becoming healthy, they can escape being the subject of this poem. Ladies and gentlemen, happy Friday to you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Do something nice for yourselves this weekend, and I plan to relax for a couple of days, and I'm going to get right back to re-recording fresh, brand new spanking video for the Last Symptom Fundamentals course. I'm excited for all newcomers to the course that they'll get to experience the heightened quality of that. And so that's what I'll be doing. I hope you all take care of yourselves, and thanks for joining me this week. Take care.